Hello, Canada. Welcome back to another edition of the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm your host, alias Tagai. Well, Trump theoretically kind of endorsed the Liberal Party. I think what he meant is they're weak and he'd rather deal with them. We'll go over that clip. We're also going to deal with a little bit of Mark Carney on how he treats women and reporters, especially when they ask real questions, which is really surprising because it was Rosemary Barton. But I think she's fighting for her job right now. I think she's fighting for a little bit of respect because she's got zilch left. So it was kind of nice to see her flop like a fish out of water. And boy, did she get destroyed. Oh, did she get destroyed on social media. The left eats their own so fast, and they're vicious. We're also going to talk about some typical mainstream lying, and it's great because it was done in French, and this is where it's really nice. Rebel has a French reporter, and she's fabulous, and she broke the story. I thought she did a pretty good job, and if we still have time, I'm going to deal with the RFK files and the water problems that there's a few people out there saying Trump's coming for the land, he wants to redraw the land. Don't listen to these people. They have an emergency down there. They need power. They got a resource problem. Obviously, the power is a major issue, but the water also falls into that as well. And they want to renegotiate. Water isn't covered under the NAFTA, or the USMCA. It's falls under the provinces. So provinces make their own deals with the states that they're joining to. We'll get to that later in the show. Let's start with the bombshell. It's too funny, people. It's too funny. Listen to Trump.
They have a $60 billion trade deficit. China has like a $300 billion last year. You said it goes up to, when you add it all up, it's $1 trillion.
Way over 100, Canada. And here's my problem with Canada. Canada was meant to be the 51st state because we subsidize Canada by $200 billion a year. We don't need their cars. We don't need their lumber. We have a lot of lumber. We freed it up, as you know, last week. We're freeing it up so that you can actually cut down a tree without being, given the death penalty. Because what these radical environmentalists have done to our country, but we freed it up. But we don't need their lumber. We don't need their energy. We don't need anything. We certainly don't want their automobiles. They make a lot of millions of automobiles are sent in. I'd rather have them made in Michigan. I'd rather have them made in South Carolina or any one of our...
You're tougher with Canada than you are with some of our biggest adversaries.
Only because it's meant to be our 51st state. And
okay, but...
but listen to this for a second.
We need their territory. They have territorial advantage. We're not going to let them get close to China.
Look,
right?
I deal with every country, indirectly or directly. One of the nastiest countries to deal with is Canada. The people that... Now, this was Trudeau. The people that good old Justin, I call him Governor Trudeau, his people were nasty, and they weren't telling the truth. They never told the truth. You know that, they'd say, well, we don't charge. Well, they do. They charge tremendous. They charge tremendous. And if you look at dairy products, what they've done to our farmers, I'd go up to Iowa, I'd go up to different places, Nebraska, and they would always complain about Canada, how they get ripped off. Do you know that Canada has a 250% tariff?
Now, you'll hear mainstream and even Doug Ford will say, "Wow, they're not even near that quota yet." It's because they regulate themselves below the quota because nobody wants to pay 200 or more % tariffs. You idiot! They would like to sell more. They would love to have that ability. But you stop them from doing it because of your milk cartel. It's illegal for me to sell my cow's milk or go and buy my neighbor's milk. This cartel is socialism. Now, if you want to regulate purchasable milk but still allow a free market, that's a different thing. That's kind of a lot more what they have down in the States. Here in Canada, you have a socialist milk cartel. It's gotta go.
tariff. 250, nobody knows that. They charge us numbers that are crazy.
But
we
what's
have a
the
very
end
big deficit with Canada, and
60
there's
billion.
no reason, much more, we have much more.
I don't think so.
Just so you understand, we subsidize Canada. And I like Canada. I love Canada. I love
But
Wayne
now
Gretzky.
the Liberal guys,
I love his wife.
the Liberal
I love
Party is going to win now in the next election,
I don't
most
care.
likely. And they were
I don't care.
down and out.
I don't
Isn't that
care.
going to make them more hostile to us and possibly
No, I'd
open
rather
the
deal
door
with a liberal than a
for
conservative.
China closer to Canada, and that would really put us in a bind.
The conservative that's running is stupidly no friend of mine. I don't know him, but he said negative things. So when he says negative things, I couldn't care less. I think it's easier to deal, actually, with a liberal. And maybe they're going to win, but I don't really care. It doesn't matter to me at all.
So your end game is what with them?
My end game is I don't want to have a big deficit. I don't want to see the United States of America, and you say 60 and I say 200, but it doesn't matter. I don't want us to pay 60 or 200 billion dollars to a country that if they were a state, think of this, it would be our biggest, most beautiful, it would be great. This state, it would be cherished. We'd take care of it. The people would pay half what they're paying right now. Canada pays very little for defense. They think we're going to defend
We protect them.
What?
We protect them.
We protect them. We protect them. Do you know in NATO they pay less than anybody else? In everything else, they go, we're in the process of buying 48 icebreakers. All of a sudden I see Canada's involved where they're going to get a piece of them. I say, what are they paying? And so I got tired of it. Here's the story. I had one of the most successful economies. I had the most successful economy in the history of our country in my first 4 years. We did a great job. Largest tax cuts ever, largest everything. We had right to try where people were able to use drugs. Stupidly, for many years, they weren't able to use, the far-reaching drugs because they weren't approved yet. Somebody's terminally ill, they couldn't do it. With me, they can do it. We did so many things. We rebuilt our military. Canada doesn't pay for military. They don't give any, they give us nothing. And they are the worst people to negotiate with of everybody.
You got them with USMCA. You finally got them around the edge on that, though.
No, I got them there. And USMCA is good, but they cheat. An agreement's good, but they cheat. And Mexico cheats also.
But China cheated on your 2019.
Can I tell you what?
Phase one, they totally cheated and dropped it with Biden. You had a great deal.
When Biden took over, he didn't push them. I would call up once every 2 weeks saying you're not living up to the agreement, and they'd buy more corn, more this. So the most we ever did was $15 billion with China, the farmers and everything, and manufacturing.
Yeah.
I had them up to $50 billion, and they were doing it. When Biden got it, do you think Biden called?
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. He would rather deal with the weak liberal than a strong conservative. Only makes sense. It only makes sense. But in the same aspect, Pierre's being a bit of a jackass because he's doing the exact same thing that the liberals were doing. Why? Why are you picking a fight? Why aren't you being calm? I don't know what happened to his Canadianism. All of a sudden, he turned into this liberal monster. I don't get it. I don't get it. I wasn't impressed when he first started doing it. Still not impressed. Obviously, he's suffering in the polls because of it. Whatever. I'm sure he'll make a bounce back. But this pretty much says it all right there. He'd rather deal with somebody that he can knock the pedestal out from underneath, kind of like he already did with Dougie, as opposed to somebody who Trump knows will release the power of Canada, will free us from our chains, and give us the ability to never again be held like we are right now against Trump. A singular monopoly of deal and trade. It's got to end. Poilievre's the only guy who since day one has been talking about it. Harper had big talks. He did a few good things. The second that he had a risk of losing his majority, he started kissing the centralist butts, and he lost it. He lost the West. They won't stand for that. And that's why I keep saying, you're going to lose Alberta and Saskatchewan. It's coming. If these liberals get in power, goodbye to your milk cow. They're gone. We're going to move on to Carney. And for some reason, he treats women even worse than Trudeau does, which I guess isn't really that surprising, I guess. But listen to the mouth on this guy.
Madam.
Mr. Carney, Stephanie Levitz with Globe and Mail. We understand that you have now placed your assets in a blind trust, so you don't know what's happening to them going forward, but you knew what they were going into that blind trust. So what are they?
Look, Stephanie, I follow the rules of the Ethics Commissioner. I'm following them well in advance of any of the requirements, as you know, because I know you know this. You know that these requirements come into effect in months. We're talking days after I became Prime Minister.
He did it for one reason and one reason only: to hide his assets. I plead with you to watch the two-part episode, the two-part series I did on Carney. This man is evil. Watch them and you will totally understand. And I think these reporters are starting to catch on, because there's enough people like me out there who are starting to make waves, and their ratings are plummeting. And not only are they plummeting, they have to shut their comments off. They've had their comments shut off for years because they can't take the truth. Now it's to the point where they've lost out on every social media platform. They're getting thumped, and they're getting shown from places like this channel here on how they lie and deceive. And it's not just the lying and the deceiving, it's the propaganda, the fear, hate, and division. It's disgusting, and it's going to come to an end. We're going to take over. It's inevitable. But it'd sure be nice to save Canada a few $1 billion. Like cut CBC. That would help. You know, pay down some of the budget, some of the deficit. Keep listening to this turd.
So I'm complying with the rules of the Ethics Commissioner, going through the processes and all these things that are necessary. And I will remind you, and I'll remind Canadians again, that the Leader of the Opposition cannot find it. And look, you look at the questions this evening, you look at the nature of the discussions, look at the nature of discussions I had with the President of France, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. The Leader of the Opposition would not be capable of having those discussions because the Leader of Opposition refuses to get his security clearance, something that it took me a few weeks to get.
That's scary. Unelected has full view of all of our classified information. Now, I know that he's already had pretty much full disclosure on him anyways. Trudeau gave him whatever he wanted. That's his general. This is Trudeau's Papa General. I mean, even Melanie Joly has said that she's been filling him in on everything that's going on, which right there, she should have lost her job. That's illegal. He wasn't even elected the Prime Minister yet. He was only running, and she was giving him information. Just her saying that should have had her removed. This guy's a punk. He's a loser. He's just out for profit. He's already helped destroy our economy. He's coming in for the final kill because he knows Trump is going to, especially if he loses. If Poilievre gets in and Trump, we can save this continent from all of these green zealots and bring real science back to the table and literally unleash the power that we have with not only our resources, but with Canadians. We are a hard-working people, and we were a friendly people. And we need to get that back. This guy's got to go. Keep listening to this schmuck.
And he has been the Leader of the Opposition for 3 years. So I comply with my responsibilities. I comply with the rules well in advance. And the Leader of the Opposition doesn't take his responsibilities at a time of, well, you should take these responsibilities at any time, but it's particularly remarkable given the stakes in global geopolitics at the moment.
Never answered the question. Instead, flipped it right over to what, especially if you watch my channel, you already know. NSICOP is a trap. It was written by the WEF. It was literally written. It was written in order to silence the opposition because they got caught. The Liberal Party got caught that they had been infiltrated by the Chinese government. All the evidence is out there. I've done previous episodes, and Sam Cooper keeps breaking more every day. In fact, I got another email last night, scrolled through it. That's why I'm going to try and maybe do 3 episodes tonight today, because these guys are so corrupt. We need to get this out there. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe, people. It means a lot, not only to me to help me build my channel, but trust me, if you can get the word out there, that's what's important. Truth can actually set us free. That's what we need. Let's get back to the schmuck.
The rules say that those assets should be publicly disclosed within 120 days, which means you'll campaign in a coming federal election, most likely within the next 120 days, and are serving as Prime Minister now, with Canadians not being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you
What
sought to
possible
avoid.
conflict would you have, Stephanie? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance. Point final.
He told her to enough in French and not good French.
Yes.
Spent most of his life in the private sector. There's no possible conflict of interest in your assets. It's very difficult to believe.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary. I mean, you start from a prior of conflict and
He's busted.
ill will. I have served in the private sector. I have stood up for Canada. I have left my roles in the private sector at a time of crisis for our country. I'm complying with all the rules. Your line of questioning is trying to invent new rules. I'm complying with the rules that Parliament has laid out and the responsibilities of the Ethics Commissioner. And I will continue to comply with those rules.
What a lying schmuck. The best part is the 2 reporters are trying to get some dignity and respect back. And I think maybe the Globe and Mail reporter might actually be kind of wondering, what have we got here? What did we help put in power? Because more information's coming out, like the bombshells I've been dropping. It's hard to find, but it's out there. It's out there. You just got to dig. You got to do your job. You got to be a journalist. These people are reporters. They're not journalists. Now, they're going to lose their damn jobs because there's no money left for them. They can't sell papers. Nobody wants to talk. Nobody wants to scroll on them online. Even on X, they just get heckled. It's hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Now, how evil's Carney? This is going on.
But I'm working with Carney, surprise, and I'm trying to get a rental program in where people can buy, put it into a 25-year pool, get a preferred rate from CMHC, and let's allow foreign buyers to buy it. They have to rent it out for 25 years, and it'll show the world that we are open for business. But I'm working with...
Canadians can't afford houses, so let's open the market to foreign buyers. Let the foreign buyers buy it, and then we'll sign them on really low interest loans. We can lock them in, and then have the people come in and rent it. You will own nothing and be happy. These people are evil. This is like a multimillionaire. This is what he does. If we had a real government, this guy would lose everything. He'd be in court. He'd have the police investigating him, and most of the assets would be taken and given back to the people, sold back to the people at a fair cost. These are the people we need to eliminate. This is why we have a housing crisis. And for those of you who don't know, Trudeau is invested in a huge housing firm in BC. Yeah. So you can't afford a house in BC? Think twice before you vote a Liberal in, or an NDP who helped keep him in power. These people are evil. This is the water issue. This lady does an amazing job explaining it.
Old. It regulates a number of ways in which the Columbia River is used, including flood control, power generation, and water supply. The river's headwaters are in British Columbia, but it flows into the state of Washington as well as Oregon. Last July, in an in-principle deal on an updated version of that treaty, they were reached by Canada and the United States, but it was not finalized before Donald Trump took office. In a recent phone call with the former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Trump called the treaty unfair to the United States. Okay, so that is a lot to take in. Why don't we break down that very latest thing that we talked about? Joining us now to better understand what's going on with the water treaties between Canada and the United States is Tricia Stadnick. She's a professor and Canada Research Chair in hydrologic modeling with the University of Calgary's Schulich School of Engineering and Department of Geography. Oh my gosh, that's a lot too. Professor, thank you so much for making time for us today.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
So there's so much to unpack when it comes to Canada and the Americans and our relationship around water, but let's begin with the Columbia Water Treaty. What's going on here? What's gone wrong here?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's suffering from bad timing in a way. The treaty was reopened for negotiations in 2018, actually, during the last Trump administration. And negotiations have been ongoing ever since. In mid-2024, the negotiators reached an agreement, and it took until about December of 2024 to fully agree on the exact terms and nature that were going to be written down, which unfortunately did not leave enough time for the agreement to be ratified in Congress before the new administration took over in the U.S.
And, okay, so then what does that mean right now?
So the agreement is still in place, and it is still holding at this point. But pausing negotiations on this agreement means that at this point, there isn't a mechanism to proceed to actually ratifying it into law to make it a treaty, which means that it's informal at best. And certainly the U.S. pausing negotiations is raising eyebrows a little bit in terms of whether or not it will actually make it to U.S. Congress in order to be brought into law. So although each party on each side right now is adhering to it, the question is for how long can this be maintained?
This has brought up the larger issue of water, Canada's sovereignty, and President Trump's interest in our water supply.
He put sovereignty in there.
I was just listening to a piece by the New York Times earlier in the week where it seems that, according to their reporting, there was one of the last conversations between President Trump and then Prime Minister Trudeau, that Trump said Canada has too much water and it's unfair and that the Americans need more access to it, which leads into this ongoing discussion about Canada's sovereignty. Give me a sense of how this is all being perceived.
Yeah, so I think there is a real difference between what is being said by the political leaders in a more heated context and what is actually happening on the ground. That said, this is not a new debate in some ways. You know, there's a long history of the U.S. having interest in Canada's water resources that dates back.
Wasn't that a nice way of calling Trudeau a liar and the Liberals and even the media? She just smacked her host. Beautiful. So well done. I really like this Tricia Stadnick.
Long before we have the current laws in place. And in fact, there was agreements back in the 1940s with discussions in the U.S. Congress in order to divert water, massive amounts of water from Canada to the U.S. We had this through the 80s and 90s with the Great Lakes. And now, once again, here we are. Water is not part of NAFTA officially. But that has been contested. And so this whole rhetoric and talk around tariffs right now begs the question, along with Donald Trump openly contesting the boundary treaty, which is in fact defined, the boundary between Canada and the U.S. is actually defined in the Waters Treaty. That was the first time that it was actually surveyed. So
okay. So now, those people that are online, especially on Facebook, there's this one guy. Nut bar. He's a nut bar. He's trying to convince people, and he's got quite the following, that Trump is going to move this treaty and he's going to take all of this land. No, that's not what it's about. The negotiations are about the water. And especially with what happened down in California. And you saw what happened. All it took was a phone call to renegotiate, for them to open up the reservoir and take stored water that we store and allow it to come down earlier and in larger quantities if the quantities are there. So we still get to meet what we need for the hydro dams, and they get to meet what they need. No more of this runoff being pushed away. Let's use the water if it's available. Don't cut them off and divert it. Send it south. They need it. They need the water. It's pretty simple, people. It's pretty simple. And to be honest, it's pretty fair. If we really negotiated a true free trade agreement, free trade, we wouldn't have the fluctuating dollars we'd have. We'd have a lot better economy between the two nations. I mean, come on. There are ways to negotiate and get around this without losing your head and going completely off. They're gonna like the one guy even said they're thinking about troops and stuff and taking land. Like, come on. People. Okay. Now on to some fake news. This is awesome. I really like this reporter.
Monsieur Poilievre, cette semaine, dans un point de presse, a exclu, via son personnel, des questions, tous les médias traditionnels pour en accepter 4 qui sont identifiés à la droite ou à l'extrême droite, dont Rebel News, qui fait campagne pour le 51e État, et Radio-Canada, parce qu'on n'avait pas de représentant d'un média comme ça qui parlait français.
Est-ce que je peux vous demander quelque chose? Vous avez mentionné qu'on était supporters du 51e État, ce qui est faux.
What a coward. What a absolute coward. I've watched this lady for years on the news. My ears curl every time she comes on. She's one of the people that I was talking about in previous episodes, that when I was working through Quebec with a guy who lived in Quebec, she was one of the people that I pointed to. She would go on French media and say something completely different than she did on English media. Absolutely unprofessional. This is why Quebec is in the state it's in. Not good. Propaganda at the highest level. These people don't deserve the right to be on television, or at least on television funded by our government. She can go and find her own left-wing media. There's hardly any left out there. They're floundering, they're dying because they get caught in all their lies. That's where she belongs. But no, she's on CBC. She's a disgrace to what is called journalism. Listen to the rest of this. It's absurd.
Hébert described every outlet other than Radio-Canada as being right to far right. But let's break that down because it's completely untrue. True North, center right, mainly editorial. Y Media, an online platform led by Yudhvir Jaswal, a journalist honored with King Charles Carney.
So she's explaining the media outlets that Poilievre took questions from. He only took 5 questions out of the 10 that were there. And if you watch news, I hate saying that, but if you do watch it, Poilievre, he's sick and tired of them. They lie. They just lie. And they ask him the stupidest questions. I used the Barrett as an example about 4 or 5 episodes ago. These reporters don't do their job. They're an absolute embarrassment to what should be called journalism. When an independent person like myself, an opinionated show, it's my journal. I'm not really a news network, does better and more truthful work than they do, that says something. So anyways, she's describing the network, the media outlets that did get to ask questions. Now, the French girl said they're all far right, right-leaning. except for the French, because they were the only French ones there. Hey, these are them. Listen very carefully. Far cry from far right.
Medal. He has interviewed Trudeau, Harper, Doug Ford, and multiple other Liberal MP. Hardly the profile of a far-right outlet. In fact, Jaswal was featured on CBC before, according to his website. Oxygen TV, a media outlet focused on family and social political issues.
Oxygen Media has been taking off. They've been doing really well. They deal a lot with the immigrants, the newer Canadians that are coming in. They're a very well, call them multicultural, but they're more on the newer cultures that have been coming in, and they've been really building a great program. And I've actually watched a lot. They are very family orientated, like a lot of immigrants are. They're fleeing countries under persecution. They understand what it's like to live under tyranny where they lose their rights. These are the loudest, strongest Canadians that we have right now. These are the ones that are screaming about all of the LGBTQ alphabet soup stuff and the drag queens and that's not far right. That's center. That's right in the center. That's the rights of a parent. That's family. That's a family. Far right. I don't know where they get this from. But again, that's what she does for a living. She goes to Quebec and says one thing, gets on CBC and says something else. Most of the time, it's all lies. It's all lies anyways.
Their editorial stance leans slightly to the right due to family values, but calling them far right is ridiculous. Ribbon News, categorized by some as editorially conservative, but certainly not far right. What's more, why media and Oxygen TV serve diverse immigrant communities?
This one is very diverse. They're pretty much strictly immigrant based. Again, they're pretty damn good network. Pretty straightforward. But very center, if anything center left, I would say personally.
These are voices representing diaspora groups, hardly a monolithic far-right presence. Meanwhile, mainstream outlets like Global, CBC, CTV, and Canadian Press were present at the event, but were not among those called upon for questions, and Prime Asia as well. So let's be clear. Hébert's claims that the press conference was dominated by right to far right media is completely false. And her assertion that Ribbon News is campaigning for Canada to become the 51st state of America, also completely false.
That'd be like them saying for me that I'm saying that's all I'm doing is I'm talking pro 51st state pro. No, I'm giving you the news. I'm telling you that separatist movement is exploding. That's why I'm here. That's why I did this channel, was to get the real news out. I would love to see Canada stay Canada. I would love to see us become what we were meant to be, the strongest, richest nation on the planet. But I guess I'm far right for saying that. This is what the media does. I'm a centrist, full-fledged centrist. I'm actually a libertarian. It would probably be the best way to explain what I follow. CBC and CTV and Radio de Canada, they're propaganda. They get money from the government. They don't even have to work for their money. They just say whatever it takes to get a bigger check. It's an absolute shame. It really is. And I can't wait to see CBC defunded. Not CBC Radio. We need that in the remote areas. I can't stress that enough. But again, we need ombudsmen from every province to make sure that at all times they're not being biased towards any particular party. In fact, they shouldn't even talk politics. They shouldn't, because there's opinions. I have an opinion. I talk. I show you the news. I give you my opinion. So to be honest, I do have a bias, my own personal bias. That I'm being honest in saying that. CBC doesn't say that. They just say, oh, no, we're not. And then you see it. You see it clear as day. I'm really glad that she did this, and she's getting better and better at her job, and her English is getting really good, and she is a perfect person to be helping Quebec out of their bubble. We've got to pop these bubbles and free the people from the propaganda that they've had shoved down their throats all their lives. Now I'm going to play a quick bit for the finale. JFK files have been released. Let's hear what they have to say.
Fall, well, today was the day. Thousands of pages of previously unseen files related to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy were released today. Right now, over 1,100 documents totaling roughly 80,000 pages are visible on the National Archives website. This comes after President Trump's push to release the files, and standing by is a man who knows the history of the assassination well, presidential historian and author James Robinault. What have we learned today, James?
Well, Austin, we learned a lot about the CIA. Most of these documents are CIA-type documents. From their plan to try to assassinate Castro, Operation Mongoose is what it was called. Lots of detail on that, involving mafia figures to help them. It's an incredible story. To Jack Ruby and Oswald being seen in a nightclub, according to a CIA memo, weeks before the assassination, to all sorts of discredit on the single bullet theory that the ballistics people thought, that this just didn't happen back when the Warren Report came out, to the CIA operation out of Mexico City, and all the intelligence they were gathering on Oswald. So it is a truckload of information. It's going to take weeks to analyze their 100-page depositions in it. It truly is a real trove of information that begins to paint a much stronger picture that the CIA knew kind of what was coming and may have been involved in the group out of Miami that was the anti-Castro group that may have been setting up Oswald. So a ton of stuff.
Does this change the official narrative?
I think it will. I mean, I think what we're going to end, as I've said before, this is like a big jigsaw puzzle, and we have a lot of pieces in place. What we didn't know were some of the identities of some of these people, and the CIA documents, everybody's got a code name. So that's going to take a long while for people to unravel. But I think it's going to show that they were very active with the group that was entangled with Oswald in New Orleans, in the summer of 1963. And the evidence is starting to look more and more like they were setting up Oswald, and that the anti-Castro group were the people who might have pulled the triggers. So I think there's a lot here to work with, a lot to analyze. And as you know, because of Paul Landis's revelation that he found the bullet in the limousine that you and I have talked about so much, that tends to prove there was an ambush, that there were multiple shooters. This will then start to give us a better idea of who might have been involved.
Yeah, so let's back up on that. So for people that are watching that haven't watched our interviews before, why do you feel it is appropriate to question the actual story? And you know what? I will say this too, by the way. The official version of the story is that Oswald was the lone gunman. So why do you feel like it's fair to question that theory?
Yeah, I think that the main thing is that when Paul Landis found the pristine bullet behind where Kennedy had been sitting and Jackie had been sitting, it showed that that bullet had only gone superficially into his back and that it fell back out. That means that the bullet didn't go through him into Conley, which is the official version. And, one bullet caused all this damage, which nobody ever believed. The problem is Kennedy gets hit, and within a split second, you can see that Conley gets hit. So there's not enough time for Oswald, who has a bold action, to shoot about 3 seconds, load and shoot again to hit Conley. So there had to be multiple shooters. And once we know that, we know that there's a conspiracy. Once we know there's a conspiracy, then the question is who was involved in it. But that evidence is pretty strong that there were multiple shooters.
From what you have seen of the documents, are there redactions?
No, I haven't yet seen any, and I've seen people right, who've been through a lot more than I have, that they haven't seen them yet. I think they really did take off the redactions. And again, this is going to help put together these pieces of the puzzle, because you have these various people who are identified in Miami, you have the people identified in Mexico City, and now you're starting to put all this stuff together to see what the puzzle looks like once you put those pieces in.
So I got to ask, this is something that you and I have...
Well, there you have it. It looks like in a couple weeks, we could start hearing a lot more of the reality of what actually happened to John F. Kennedy. I'm sure RFK right now is rifling through this, if he hasn't already, and has a team working on it. And, the Kennedy family, some of them are so far left, they won't believe it anyways, so whatever. But RFK, I'm glad you fought for this. The whole world wants to know. This is just the largest conspiracy, longest lasting conspiracy, the most popular, longest lasting conspiracy, especially in the States, but around the world. What happened was atrocious. It really showed that the infiltration in the CIA and the FBI and other of the Alphabet Squad were already working on their own. And we know this because of Hoover. So I'm glad it's out. I can't wait to hear more. Who knows? Maybe I'll end up getting the documents and kind of reading through them. There's been people studying this for generations. I'm just going to leave it in their hands. Like I said, I'll probably browse through it just out of curiosity, just because of my, I'm that kind of guy. But I really hope they find some pertinent information. And the second I hear anything, I will guarantee you will hear it right here on the Canadian Citizen Journal. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget, if you are, to punch that notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes, and it helps me build the channel. Until next time, you guys, I'm Alias to Guy.